He thought it was just a mission. Just one night with an alien diplomat. No feelings. No future. No consequences. But now, deep beneath an alien ocean, he's running. Running through steel corridors. From a woman who's pregnant with his child. And holding an ancient weapon in her hand. She doesn't want his apology. She doesn't even want revenge. She wants him to face the blood they made together. Stay until the end, because the choice he makes in the final minute will decide the fate of two galaxies. Ryland Foster had been trained to manipulate minds, not emotions. As a senior intelligence officer under the Earth Federation's Shadow Wing, he had learned the art of infiltration, deception, and diplomatic theater. What he hadn't trained for was the way Aerolith Vexel looked at him that night across the glass dome of Velsar's observatory, with eyes that glowed like molten silver beneath the light of twin moons. He arrived on Velsar Station with a clear mission: earn Aerolith's trust, gain access to her strategic protocols, and extract any intelligence that could preempt an interstellar war. Earth had reason to believe the Velsar Empire was mobilizing under the guise of diplomacy, and Ryland, with his chameleon-like charm and forged credentials as a cultural liaison, was their key to uncovering it. The first time he met her, Aerolith wore ceremonial armor, a gleaming scarlet exosuit that clung to her like flame to a sword. She didn't smile, didn't even blink longer than necessary. Her voice was clipped, almost mechanical, rehearsed from a lifetime of being a symbol before being a person. Ryland played his part well, the charming envoy from Earth, fluent in 6 dialects, offering trade and cultural exchange. It was a cold game beneath crystal chandeliers and political platitudes. But it shifted one night. It was after a long summit day, when the Velsar diplomats retired to their gravity chambers, and the station's night cycle dimmed the lights to hues of lavender and cobalt. Aerolith lingered at the edge of the glass observatory, overlooking the oceanic trench that surrounded the station. The sea beyond shimmered with bioluminescent creatures, flowing like stars trapped underwater. Ryland, dressed down in a simple ambassador's tunic, approached her with a bottle of Terran wine he'd smuggled in as part of his diplomatic gifts. He made a quip about how politics was easier to digest when fermented. She didn't laugh, not at first. But she didn't walk away either. They talked. About war. About expectations. About being weapons shaped by bloodlines. She told him about her first kill at the age of 9. He told her about losing his brother in the Orion Corridor, not to battle, but to bureaucracy that denied him transport back home. Somewhere between glass refills and long silences, the line between pretense and truth blurred. She removed her gloves. It was a gesture so small, yet so intimate in her culture, Ryland almost missed it. Her hand brushed his, not by accident. The wine was not strong, but the moment was. When she turned to look at him again, her eyes were no longer cold. They were searching. He should have walked away then. Reported back. Logged the breakthrough. Extracted the data. Instead, he kissed her. It wasn't a passionate frenzy, nor a mission-driven tactic. It was quiet, slow, like two storms finding their still point. She didn't resist. She leaned into it. When they parted, she led him through the silent corridors of her palace quarters, past guards who didn't question their princess, and into a chamber draped in red and black, the colors of her house. Ryland didn't sleep that night. Not from guilt, but from the weight of what it meant. He watched her sleep as foreign stars moved across the transparent ceiling. Her face, so often carved in duty and rigidity, was at peace. For a moment, he saw the woman beneath the crown. And he realized, too late, that this mission had already shifted into something unclassified. At 0600 hours, he rose quietly. Dressed, left a diplomatic token by her bedside, a small crystal encoded with Terran poetry, and disappeared down the corridor before anyone could see him. Before he could see himself reflected too long in her world. His report back to Earth would be clean, objective, emotionless. But the memory would not be. He thought that night would remain between them. A whisper in the galaxy. A secret kept beneath oceans and duty. He didn't know she would carry it inside her, literally, across star systems. And one day, bring it back to him not as a question, but as a reckoning. 3 weeks after returning from Velsar, Ryland Foster sat at a classified debrief table in a windowless room buried beneath the North Atlantic Command Hub. His official report had been clinical, detailed, efficient. It catalogued troop movements, coded language shifts, minor weaknesses in communication relays. What it didn't include was the memory of her breath against his shoulder, or the feel of her fingers slipping the crystal from his hand in the dark. He didn't tell Command about the night. But he didn't delete it either. He encoded the audio log Aerolith had left him, a raw stream of emotional resonance she thought he'd never see again, into a private node buried inside his neural implant. No one asked questions. No one suspected anything. Then, on day 92, a red priority alert shattered his morning silence. The message wasn't from Earth. It came from an interstellar medical relay orbiting neutral space. Subject, VEXA, Aerolith, status, confirmed pregnancy. Species fusion viable. Genetic markers confirm 48% Terran DNA. Fetal stage, 13 weeks. The words didn't make sense at first. He reread the notification 3 times. Cross-referenced the identifiers. It wasn't a mistake. It wasn't hypothetical. She was carrying his child. And she had filed no request. No demand for support. No plea. Just a clinical entry in a neutral database, logged by Velsar protocols as required by interspecies reproduction law. The Federation didn't contact him. But whispers started to form. Intel monitors flagged the anomaly, but since Velsar wasn't pressing charges or making threats, no diplomatic action was taken. Ryland was left to navigate the aftermath in silence. He could have reached out. Sent a message. A single encrypted line. But every time he opened the comms window, his hands froze. How could he explain that he never meant to leave something behind? That he never imagined she would want to keep a part of him? Instead, he booked a transport under an alias. Left the capital. Moved from relay station to backwater trade port, eventually settling in Zalun Outpost, a research station built into the seafloor of an uninhabited moon. A place with no diplomatic routes. No questions. He told himself it was for her safety. For the child. that he would only cause them harm. But deep down, he knew it was fear. Fear of what she might say. Fear that the child would look like him. Fear that, for the first time, the war wasn't out there, it was inside him. Meanwhile, Aerolith Vexa walked the ceremonial chambers of Velsar's temple of lineage with calm precision. Her belly barely showing, yet her mind already hardened into decision. She didn't cry. She didn't mourn. She trained. She spoke to the unborn child in low tones, stories not of vengeance, but of history, of resilience. She archived a message, set to activate on a proximity trigger. He will know he was chosen, not made. Her people asked no questions. Velsar had no shame in bloodlines forged through fire or espionage. To them, the child would be born of strength. But to Aerolith, it would also be born of silence. And she had no intention of staying silent forever. Somewhere, in the darkness between stars, a reckoning had begun to burn. And its countdown had already started. The first sound Ryland heard was the metallic screech of the outer hatch disengaging. Then came the shift in air pressure, the telltale thump in the eardrums like the deep sea itself had breathed in. He froze. Zaelun Station wasn't meant to be found. Built on the floor of a dead moon's ocean, it housed the galaxy's most discreet researchers, fugitives, and ghosts. He had bought his anonymity with silence, traded identity for safety. But the pressure readings blinking on the wall weren't part of any scheduled docking. Someone had come for him. The corridor lights dimmed to emergency hue. Shadows stretched long across the polished steel floor. Ryland stepped backward, his pulse already surging. His neural implant buzzed once, an encrypted override. Someone had bypassed internal access. She was here. His breath caught. Not because he doubted it, but because some part of him had known this moment would come. From the eastern corridor, footsteps echoed. Not hurried. Not chaotic. Deliberate. Boots that knew the station's design, despite never having walked its halls. Ryland ducked into the side maintenance shaft, a cramped tube filled with cables and coolant lines. He moved quickly, retracing every exit route he'd memorized during his first week here. Security sirens wailed low and slow, like an old creature stirring in its sleep. Red lights pulsed down the hallways as warning messages flashed across embedded wall panels: unauthorized entry, containment breach. Behind him, the main chamber doors hissed open. She walked in. Aerolith Vexa no longer wore the ornamental armor of a diplomat. Her bodysuit was functional, matte black beneath a blood-red ceremonial cloak. Her stomach, unmistakably full, pushed slightly against the structured fabric. In her right hand, she held an ancient Velsar vessel, a hollow urn made of obsidian and mother stone, etched with lineage glyphs. A symbol of inheritance, of memory, of confrontation. The few residents of Zaelun scattered at the sight of her. They could feel it. Not just the strangeness of her presence, but the gravitational weight of her purpose. She didn't speak. Didn't explain. She simply kept walking, following the trace signature embedded in Ryland's implant, a signature she had memorized from the moment he touched her. Ryland reached the lower tram level, slammed his palm against the console. Manual override. Reroute emergency lift to docking bay 6. The system paused. long enough to spike his panic. Override denied. He cursed under his breath, pivoted down the emergency maintenance ladder. The metal rungs burned cold. His boots clanged too loudly in the silence. Every sound betrayed him. Every heartbeat felt too large for his chest. A floor above, Aerolith turned toward the echo. Her steps still slow, composed, measured. A predator that did not need speed to be lethal. The urn at her side pulsed faintly, a Velsar bioreactive relic. It had already begun recording the ambient tension, the scent of his fear. Rylan ducked into a storage bay. Breathe. Think. Fight or run. No weapons. No backup. He pressed his back against the cold alloy wall and tried to remember the man he used to be. The one who infiltrated empires. Who seduced princesses for data. But all he could think about was the look on her face the night they last spoke. Not angry. Not betrayed. Just hollowed. Footsteps outside. He moved again. Another door. Another failed route. Aerolith was hurting him, whether she intended to or not. Driving him toward the glass spine of the station, the observation corridor suspended above the ocean floor, lined with reinforced crystal and a breathtaking view of glowing reefs. And nowhere to hide. Rylan stepped into the corridor, breath ragged. The lighting inside flickered, ocean light filtered through alien plankton, turning the whole hallway blue-green and weightless. At the far end, the door slid open. Aerolith stepped through. They locked eyes. Rylan didn't move. She raised the urn slightly, not to strike, but to let it hum between them. I followed the sound of your silence, she said, her voice calm, too calm. Rylan's throat closed around words he didn't have. The fear wasn't of her. It was of what she made him remember. She stopped 5 steps away. The vessel glowed between them, casting their shadows long across the transparent floor. You ran, she said, not accusing. Stating. I didn't know what to say. But you knew how to leave. His voice cracked. I thought it would be better, safer. For you. For the child. The light inside the urn flared. Not angry. Alive. You don't get to decide what safety means. Not for him. Not for me. He nodded slowly. There was nothing left to run from. Nowhere to run to. She stepped forward. Her hand reached out. Not to strike. Not to pull. Just open. The station around them groaned. A whale passed beyond the glass, its song a distant tremor. Come with me, she said. Or stay broken. But don't vanish again. He looked at her. At the life she carried. At the thing they had made, not by accident, but by consequence. And for the first time in months, Rylan Foster stopped running. Rylan stood at the far end of the glass corridor, breath shallow, heart thudding like the pulse of the ocean beyond the transparent walls. Water stretched out endlessly on all sides, a blue abyss teeming with flickers of alien life. He could go no further. The emergency bulkheads behind him had locked. In front of him stood Aerolith Vexa, cloaked in silence. He had nowhere left to run. The ocean outside cast shifting shadows across her face, as though the world itself couldn't decide whether she was mercy or judgment. She stepped forward slowly, the soft thud of her boots echoing with unbearable weight. He watched her, every fiber in him coiled to act, to retreat, but there was no exit now. Not from her. Not from what he had left behind. She stopped just a few paces away. Her eyes met his, steady and unwavering. Then, without a word, she placed her hand on her belly. "I don't need you to be a father," she said, her voice quiet, almost tender. "I need you to not disappear like you never existed." The words struck harder than any accusation. He opened his mouth, then closed it again. "How did you apologize for vanishing? For turning love, or whatever fragile thing it might have been, into absence?" She reached into the folds of her cloak and lifted the obsidian urn. Ryland flinched instinctively, expecting the crash of it against the wall or floor. But instead, she held it level for a moment, fingers brushing the carved glyphs. Then, with a graceful turn of her wrist, she let it fall. The urn shattered. Not violently. Not destructively. It came apart midair, as though it had never been solid, scattering into a wave of soft light and memory. Holographic fragments spun outward, filling the corridor like drifting snow. Ryland watched, stunned, as one of the glowing shards hovered before him. And then he saw it. Her hand in his. A whispered laugh in the dark. The slow, cautious touch of two bodies unsure whether they were enemies or something else. The memory played around them, flickering and incomplete, but painfully real. It wasn't surveillance. It wasn't strategy. It was emotion, encoded in sensation. She had recorded that night. Not with tech, but with a relic that bound memory to blood. He turned to her, eyes wide, voice ragged. "Why show me this?" "Because you think what we had was a mistake," she said. "I needed you to see what it really was." He looked again at the floating memory. In it, he reached up and tucked a strand of her hair behind her ear. She closed her eyes, just for a moment. He had forgotten that. Or buried it. "I didn't mean to," he began, but the words trailed off. "You didn't mean to stay." "I know." She walked to the edge of the corridor, placed her hand on the curved glass. Outside, a massive luminous creature drifted past, its tendrils pulsing like the breath of a sleeping god. Her reflection shimmered beside it, alien and human at once. "Our child will be born with both light and shadow," she said. "I've made peace with that." Ryland moved closer, but slowly. Not because he feared her, but because he feared what he might see in himself if he stood too close. "I thought staying would ruin you," he whispered. "Would make everything worse." She looked over her shoulder, eyes filled not with anger, but something far heavier. "You don't understand," she said. "You didn't ruin me. You left me to carry everything alone. That's the difference." The memory lights began to dim, dissolving one by one into the air. The corridor returned to silence, save for the distant hum of the ocean outside. Aerolith turned to face him fully, her hand still resting on the gentle curve of her abdomen. "I came here not for vengeance," she said. "Not even for closure. I came because this child deserves to know that he wasn't an accident in the dark. Ryland felt the burn of shame crawl through his chest. Not because she was cruel, but because she wasn't. Because she hadn't come to hurt him, but to make him face the truth he had fled across galaxies to avoid. He nodded slowly, eyes never leaving hers. "I'm sorry," he said. "Truly." "I don't want sorry," she replied. "I want you to decide. Are you a ghost? Or are you something real?" The ocean beyond them pulsed again. A soft blue wave washed over the walls of the corridor, and the unborn world inside her seemed to answer in silence. He took one step closer. Then another. And though neither of them reached out, the space between them finally stopped feeling like exile. The corridor was quiet now, the ocean pressing its silence against the curved glass like a witness who had seen too much and would tell no one. Ryland stood still, not because he was afraid, but because he no longer needed to move. He had spent months running through space and guilt, but here, in the lull after confrontation, stillness felt heavier than any sprint. Aerolith didn't speak. She moved toward the remnants of the urn, kneeling with a kind of grace only pain could teach. Her fingers brushed against the shards, and something inside the wreckage pulsed, faint and rhythmic. She picked up the core fragment, the heart of the memory vessel, and pressed it into Ryland's hand. He felt warmth. Not heat. Not light. But a vibration. It was sound, low, muffled, intimate. Not words. Heartbeats. Two of them. The twin rhythms of a night they both remembered, buried in the weight of their choices. One beat was faster, stronger. The other delicate, fluttering. The first was hers. The second was not yet born. He closed his fingers around the core and closed his eyes. The sound filled him, not just in his ears, but deep in his chest. And with it came everything he had refused to face, the intimacy, the consequence, the impossible miracle of something real emerging from a moment he had tried to file away like a mission report. When he opened his eyes, she was standing again, her back turned to him. They stood before the gate to the upper shuttle docks. Beyond it, a transport vessel waited, humming with quiet life, its systems already primed for departure. Aerolith didn't look at him when she spoke. Choose. The word was soft, unforced, but absolute. You can follow me, she continued, and be present. Not as a hero. Not as a father. But as yourself. Or you can stay here, and continue hiding in fear that's no longer yours alone. She took a step forward. The gate hissed open with a mechanical sigh. Beyond it, pale light spilled through, bathing her in silver outlines. I won't ask again. Ryland stood frozen. Not in indecision, but in the weight of decision. He looked at the core fragment in his hand, still pulsing. The heartbeat hadn't faded. Neither had hers. For a long moment, he simply listened. Behind him, the ocean moved. Outside the glass, creatures drifted through the dark, ancient, strange, radiant. He remembered something she'd once said in the observatory, that stars and oceans were not opposites, but mirrors. Maybe that's what this was. A mirror. He thought of the man who first boarded the Velsar station. A spy with a borrowed name, chasing strategy over sincerity. That man had vanished the moment he kissed her. He just hadn't admitted it until now. Rylan looked up. Aerolith was already walking through the gate. He didn't call her back. He didn't speak. He simply moved. One step. Then another. Not rushed. Not desperate. Just certain. He passed through the threshold and followed her into the docking bay. The transport lights flickered gently, as though acknowledging his arrival. She turned slightly, only enough to know he was there. Her eyes didn't soften. Her lips didn't smile. But there was a shift, a quiet loosening of something inside her. She didn't say welcome. He didn't say I'm here. They didn't need to. The gate closed behind them with a slow, final hush. From a distance, Zaelun Station faded into the folds of ocean shadow, cradling the secrets of all who had hidden there. But aboard the vessel, there was no more hiding. Rylan stood beside her as the engines powered up, still holding the fragment in his hand. It was quiet. But the echo of two heartbeats continued. And for the first time, he didn't want them to stop.